Today's video is brought to you by AlmostHeaven.com. Handcrafting at-home saunas since 1977. Want better sleep, less stress, and faster recovery? Now's the perfect time. Shop saunas, cold plunges, hybrids, and accessories. Use our exclusive code at checkout to save 5%. Link below.
Today, Bo, our topic is commitment and the role commitment plays in an overall change in our life. And we know that to make a positive and long-lasting change, we need to have a commitment, but commitment is just one step in a number of steps to get there. Talk about the role of commitment in the overall change.
Absolutely, David. And I think in general, the term commitment tends to create apprehension in us all, whereas we're not so sure, so we fail to commit in any area of our life, where at the root, if it's a thought and if it occurs more than once, it's probably something deep down we know we need to do. But for some reason or another, the term commitment, it scares us into paralysis and we end up doing nothing. So ultimately, as far as affecting positive change in our lives, Dave, it's really a matter of 4 steps. And this can apply to a job change. It can apply to picking up a new hobby, playing a new sport. But the 4 steps, they go in the following order. So first and foremost, we assess our situation. We look at all of the parameters that apply to where we are now. And if we've decided that a change needs to be made, we're probably looking at those aspects of our current situation that are not so pleasant, that we would like to see different. But until we actually assess our immediate situation, we really don't know what needs to be changed other than feedback or input from others. And case in point, if it's not coming from people that we love and from people that are within our inner circle, we're probably not going to give them the time of day. So after we assess our immediate situation, the very next thing we do is we make a decision as best as we can based on the internal assessment, based on the feedback from those that we love and that we trust and that we truly believe have our best interest at heart. We make a decision. Now, let's use the example of a job change. Okay, let's say that we're currently in the sales and marketing field and we've had a certain amount of success, say over the last 10 years. But we've kind of reached a point of stagnation where we do not see much more opportunity if we continue on the same path that we're on. So this is all part of the assessment, which we're talking about. And we've come to the final step of deciding to go in a different direction. Now, this could be with a completely different company. This could be approaching the CEO at the current company and asking for a slightly different role within the same organization that's going to allow us to more fully utilize our talents and put us in a position to continue onward and upward. Is that we reach the point of decision after we've made the thorough assessment. Then and only then do we come to our topic of conversation for today, that being the commitment. Because we can make a decision, and if it's not one that's coming from conviction, we will quit at the first sign of adversity. Life is too hard. Struggles, challenges, obstacles are far too abundant for us to be able to carry through with a decision if we're not completely committed to it. And part of that commitment could come out of responsibility. You know, coming back to our job analogy, we know that we have a responsibility to provide financially for our families. So we know that quitting is not an option, but we also know that continuing down the same road that we've been traveling for the last 10 years is also not an option, because that's going to lead to that point of stagnation where we're dreading Monday mornings, where we're counting the seconds on the clock every day to when we can make it to the weekend and drown away all of our troubles. Okay, either side of the situation is not one that we want to be caught up in. So the commitment is what's going to hold us to the decision that we made after we assessed our situation. Now, my favorite definition of commitment, and I heard this from a mentor of mine probably 15 years ago. He said, Bo, commitment is doing the thing you said you were going to do long after the mood you made it in has less. Now, let me say that again. Commitment is doing the thing you said you were going to do long after the mood you made it in has left. Because feelings, they change on a dime. Commitments, particularly when we make ourselves accountable, will stand the test of time, no matter what. If you tell me, Dave, that you are going to swim a sub 30 70.3 race this year, I'm going to hold you accountable to it. You're going to put the time in the water. You're going to train. You're going to prepare. That way you're not just deciding, you're committing. And the way that I can assess your commitment is actually seeing the work that you're putting in. And that leads us to the fourth step, which is the actual action where you make your commitment a reality. When I can see you taking the necessary steps towards making that commitment known, I know you're that much more serious about that decision that you made after the assessment. So commitment is so important in this particular case, because if it's up to us to live our lives based on our feelings, we will never get anywhere. We will never know anything different than the status quo. And living a life anything other than on purpose with a passion, in my mind, is a life that's not even worth living.
And that action and that follow through is, I can see how key that is. But then there's also the accountability by the people you got your feedback from in the first place when you were making those assessments on the change you wanted to make.
Absolutely. Because no man or woman is an island. We are not meant to live our lives completely and totally alone. We need the input. We need the accountability, because left to our own discretion, more often than not, we are our own worst enemies. We know that.
Are there any steps on this follow through, this action that we're continuing to take to be is there an accountability steps we can set into place with the people we respect, the people we got the feedback from? Is there something you can do in your life, whether it's in your career, your fitness, your relationship, to go back and go, okay, here we're at 4 weeks out since we started our commitment. Now we're 6 weeks out or 3 months out. What kind of things can we do to put into place to make sure that our actions are still going in the right direction?
Absolutely. So, Dave, let's just start with the illustration of a board of directors. Okay, do you know any major publicly traded company that operates without a board of directors? Okay, so what I would suggest, and the reason that I can speak so strongly about this is something that I've done in my own life, is establish for yourself a personal board of directors. Okay, 10 years ago, I handpicked 4 men to become part of my personal board of directors. Now, are there any qualifications for these people that you put? Is there a total number? How old should they be? Life experience? I would say no. It would simply be a number that you can manage, because when you're speaking of accountability, there is going to be regular and ongoing interaction. and also men or women that you aspire to be in their position. So the way that I put it, these are for men that are simply further down the road of life that I would like to travel. They've made the mistakes that I'm going to make. They've fought the battles that I'm going to fight. They've lived the adventures that I want to live. And they have loved their wives in a manner that I want to love my wife. So with these four men, I define the rules of the relationship. We meet once a quarter for an hour at a time. I have invited them into my life to ask me the hard questions, the questions that I would hesitate to answer freely to just anyone who said, "Hey, Bo, tell me about your marriage." "Hey, Bo, how much money are you making?" So these aren't questions that I would be that eager to share with anyone outside of my immediate circle. So what this has done over the last 10 years is it's created an almost father-son like relationship. Whereas I know that whatever I do within the quarter, good or bad, will have to be reported to these four men. And they range in age from 70 down to 45. Okay, so they don't necessarily have to be significantly older than you are. Okay, but to answer your question, coming full circle, because now we're speaking on the fourth step of action. And even though action is what we act is actually the manifestation of our change, it's still a byproduct of commitment. Because without the commitment, the actions are meaningless. Because we can all act out of impulse due to a feeling. Someone cuts us off in traffic, we make an obscene gesture, we sleep late, we break our alarm because it didn't go off, so on and so forth. A commitment is going to lead to an action that we know in our heart of hearts is absolutely necessary to capitalize on that decision we made after a careful assessment of our immediate situation, which is another thing that your personal board of directors can aid in, is helping you see beyond yourself. Because if you think about it, we do not have the luxury of observing ourselves 24/7. It's not as if we have a mirror that floats in front of our face all day long, giving us insight into our every waking moment.
There are some smaller examples that we can probably pass along. This is pretty heavy, having a personal board of directors in such a potentially life-altering road, having the feedback from some great mentors. Let's give some small examples that we can build some success on, whether it's training, whether it's a book club, you're meeting with people on a regular basis, or getting some short-term feedback. That way you're on the right track. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I would just encourage our listeners to start with just a list of interests. What is it that we love to do? What is it that in the act of doing, time simply flies? Okay, so we start with interest, and it could be athletic, it could be vocational, it could be related to travel. Okay, we come up with a list of, say, 5 interests. Okay, so that's assessing our immediate situation. And out of those 5, perhaps we decide to pursue maybe 2 of them. And in this case, let's say we're learning how to play golf and we're learning to speak a foreign language. Okay, so that's the decision we've made after assessing our immediate list of opportunities. Okay, so the third step is, how do we commit to our 2 new interests? Okay, well, with golf, there's significant time investment required and a fairly significant financial commitment. Golf is not a cheap sport. Okay, so we determine 2 nights per week that we can spend 1 hour at the driving range. Either we hire a coach or an instructor, or we simply enlist the help of a friend whom we know loves golf. And this is everything from how to grip a club to how to swing a club, which clubs to hit at what particular times. Again, it's brand new, but we're interested enough that we're literally setting aside 2 specific blocks in our schedule after work at night to pursue our new interests. So the commitment comes with the actual trips to the driving range. This also ensures action, it ensures accountability. And we commit to 1 year or specific time blocks where we give ourselves enough time. And particularly, we're talking about interests here. So it's not really do or die. Now, that doesn't mean that commitment is any less important. It just, in all practical purposes, our new interest is not going to be putting dollars in the bank. So we can give ourselves a little bit more wiggle room when it comes to the actual pursuit and the action that follows through. But we need to commit to a minimum time period where we give ourselves enough time to see if that interest is really all that we thought it was to begin with. And the same could easily apply to learning a foreign language, is that we've traveled enough in the past abroad that we can see the convenience or the benefit of being able to speak multiple languages. So we're never really going to know until we try. And that commitment comes in setting aside a certain number of hours per week to practice. If it's Rosetta Stone that we're using, if it's seeking out a local instructor in our community, it's the time that's going to demonstrate your commitment. And it's the action that actually brings your commitment to a quantifiable level, where I can pick up the phone and say, Dave, did you go to the driving range on Tuesday and Thursday night? Dave, did you spend 5 hours this week practicing your Spanish? And it's either a yes or a no. There's no maybe. That's the thing about accountability. A question based or grounded in accountability can never be met with a response, maybe. It's either you did it or you didn't, simply put.
I think of a couple examples right now, and I can say my wife is practicing piano, and she has to practice it 2 or 3 times a week. And she says, I'm going to my room now to practice piano, and that's her time. And she's doing that. Another example I can think of right now is either a book club, like you're committing to 1 chapter or 3 chapters a week because you know when you gather with your group of book readers, you're going to discuss that chapter. Did you read it? There is no maybe. You either read the chapter or you didn't. And same thing with a personal trainer. And this comes back to accountability. And these are kind of building upon each other and I guess giving people some confidence and some success. There's that accountability of having a trainer, someone you see, let's say 2 or 3 times a week. You go there, they're waiting for you, you know they're waiting for you, and then it develops that commitment, integrity on your part that I've made a decision to commit to something, and here's my actionable follow through.
No question. And the actual practice of your commitment is going to be that much more likely when you invite other people in. Commitment is not a solo journey.
One final thing here, we have a couple of minutes, is how do you choose this personal board of directors?
So in my personal experience, and as I indicated before, I have 4. I picked one who was a member of my church. I picked one who was working within the same company that I was at the time, right when I started out of college. I picked one who I've known my entire life, who was a friend of my dad's growing up. And then I picked one who was in my sport of triathlon. Okay, so definitely interests of mine, and varying degrees of, I guess, intimacy to begin with. In other words, it wasn't someone that I just knew on the surface. I trusted them, I guess. Ultimately, there has to be that trust factor, because trust without vulnerability, accountability is not going to work.
That's a good group of people. Well, Bo, this has been our topic of commitment today, and I can see how valuable this is, and it's nothing to be taken lightly because of the long-term positive benefits that it can have on your life and those around you?
Well, Dave, there's just too much going on in this fast paced, distracted society that we live in, where there are so many options that we're presented with every day and so many decisions. Some are very important, some not so much so, but the more choice that's introduced into our life, the more important commitment becomes. Because if we don't watch ourselves, we can become distracted and we'll never get anything done, particularly that which is most important to us. So, just to recap, 4 steps that are involved in affecting lasting positive change. Number one, we assess our situation. Number two, we make a decision. Number three, we commit. And then ultimately, number four, we take action. And you could remember it as ADCA. ADCA, baby.
Looking for a great at-home sauna at a great price? Get 5% off any indoor or outdoor sauna, cold plunge, or infrared sauna from Almost Heaven with my discount code DAVE, 5% off at checkout. For over 40 years, Almost Heaven saunas have been trusted as the top American home sauna manufacturer. Almost Heaven saunas deliver high-quality products and firmly stands behind the holistic benefits the sauna brings to your mind and your body. Again, get 5% off any order with my discount code DAVE, 5% off at almostheaven.com. There's also a direct link below this video.